Hey designer, have you ever been working on a file either in Photoshop or Illustrator and then did a file save and then closed out of your file, went back to working on something else for that same project or a different project, and then you heard from your boss or your client and they messaged you and said, hey, can you go back to this file and make a change? I want to see this change, or the client wants to see a change. And they've asked you to showcase another version. And you went in and you looked at all your files that you had and you realized, oh no, I don't have any more versions of this file. I've actually saved over my work and now everything is disappeared and I have no idea what the heck I did to redo the whole image again. It's not a good feeling to do that, is it? And it's even more frustrating if you feel like you're under pressure or under deadline to get these changes done and out the door for approval so you can get this project off your plate onto something else. Well, my name is Stacy Schilling. I'm a visual design expert and I'm the owner and creator of the Stacy Schilling Education Design Hub, and I'm here to help you understand what to do with your work. You can always visit my website at stacyschilling.com and get more information on the Photoshop, Illustrator, and web courses I teach, as well as the private lessons that I teach in 5, 10, and 20-hour lessons so I can help you one-on-one and answer those questions. But let's go back to the file save as. I want to tell you a story. Now, years ago in my design career, when I was working as an independent contractor with an agency called Aquin out of Los Angeles, I got an opportunity which was amazing. And that opportunity was to work at Disney. Now, when I say the word Disney, most people get super excited because Disney is an amazing place to be. You know, Disneyland is the happiest place on earth. I love Disneyland. It has a special place in my heart. But working for Disney is super amazing and awesome. However, there is something you need to know about Disney. Now, Disney was notorious for making you save every revision that you were asked to perform on a design piece. So whether it was in Photoshop, Illustrator, or InDesign, every time you were given some changes on a project, you had to do a file save as and do an underscore R1, R2, R3, R4, and so forth. The R stood for revision. So revision 1, revision 2, revision 3, revision 4, and so forth. The reason why is they wanted to see every revision of every file that's ever created, because if they ever wanted to go back to a previous revision, they could go get it. So a minimum number of revisions on files that I was working on, like a bare minimum, was 350 revisions. And you're like, 350 revisions? Yes, no joke. Disney made us save every revision of what we did. And we had to number them. And the reason why is if the vice president, if the art director, the creative director, the president, whoever was in charge said, I want to see revision numbers 35, 87, 192, and 268, you had to be able to go into your files and pull all those revisions out and represent them again for approval and feedback. Because that person that was requesting those files wants to look at those designs again to see, were any of these 4 working for the direction that we want to take the project? Yes or no? Now, was there maybe 1 or 2 or 3 of them that maybe we could combine in a new design that hadn't been created again? It's possible. So when you're working in Photoshop, Illustrator, or InDesign, before you ever save your file, I always tell my students to do a file save as. And the reason why I do that is I educate them and let them know that every time you do a file save as, you're saving a revision that you might need and come back to. And the reason why is, what happens if you're working on a Photoshop file, you're doing all these really cool filters and effects and all these cool features, and then you do a file save and you save your file. 1, your history is going to be completely erased, so everything that you think you have done is going to be gone. Number 2, if you didn't write anything down on what steps you took and what you did to get from point A to point B, you're going to be out of luck. Number 3, when you go to open that file, and you may not even open the file that day. You might not even open it the next day. You might not even open that for 2 weeks. You might not even open that file for 2 months. Better yet, you may not even open that file for 2 years. And guess what? Chances of you remembering 2 years later what you did with that design to create the effects that you did, you're probably going to be like, I don't even remember what I had for breakfast, let alone what I did 2 years on this file. My point exactly. It is super vital and super helpful, especially, oh my goodness, applies so much in Photoshop. When you're working, especially in Photoshop and including Illustrator and InDesign, because I'm not going to leave those programs behind, you really, 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 really want to make sure that every change that you're making to a file, I don't care what it is, I don't care if it's a logo, I don't care if it's an illustration, I don't care if it's a graphic, I don't care if it's a website banner, I don't care if it's a website concept, I don't care if it's a poster, I don't care if it's a brochure or a catalog with 400 pages, doesn't matter. You need to do a file save as, so you have a copy of that file. So if somebody comes back to you looking for it, whether it's the next day, the next week, the next month, or even the next year or 5 years from now, you can know exactly what you have done to that file and how you created the image that you did, so that way if you need to make a change to the image. I'll give you another example. When I was working for NBC at the NBC agency on the NBCUniversal lot, it was the coolest experience ever. That was probably my favorite temp assignment I ever had in my design career. I love that job. It also was helped out too when they provided free lunch. That was a bonus. And a bigger bonus was we had little TVs in our little cubicles. So while we're waiting for a project to save or even move a file, which took a minimum of 30 minutes, I could catch up on all my soap operas and all my TV shows, which was awesome. But in the design department, I was in the production team. And this also applied in the production, but more so in the design department. Those designers were asked to create oodles and oodles of design concepts of the shows that were being produced. So I was on the production team for Heroes. So for Heroes, I had to take the artwork that the designers had created and refigure out exactly what they did at a higher resolution. So sometimes I had no idea what they did, and they didn't even name their layers, which is like a complete catastrophe. Those designers were constantly cranking out concepts for approval. I cannot even begin to count and remember how many revisions that 3 designers created for one show for Heroes. There was probably a minimum of 500 plus designs that they kept cranking out. Every time they made a change, they did a file save as, and then they would present it, and they would get feedback from the art director, the creative director, even the production manager to get feedback. Sometimes it even went to the vice president of the company and sometimes the president of the company to get feedback to know what to do with that design. So they were also notorious for saving lots of files. So when you're working on a massive file and there's a lot of layers, especially in Photoshop, because you know in Photoshop you can have like 100 plus layers in a file, and they can be even grouped in folders and they can be named, which is great. But if you don't remember what you did to create layer 87, you're going to be like, I don't even remember what I did. So it's really helpful that whenever you're making a change to a file, you do a file save as, and you can create as many revisions as you can for that file. And there's no such thing as too many revisions. In the design world, the more revisions you have, the better. Because sometimes, and I'll give you another great example, is sometimes you might create a design concept for a client. And if you've done a file save as and you've had that revision or that file saved away, but the client doesn't want that design because they want something completely different, that's okay. Guess what? You can recycle that artwork. And you're like, what? I'm like, yeah, you can recycle your artwork. I'll give you another example. So I was working on a project for a company. Unfortunately, it's no longer in business, Valley Parking Services. And they wanted some new trifold brochures created. And I was struggling to figure out 2 different versions of what to create for the design. So I remembered that I had some projects that I had saved because I did a file save as, and I had hidden them away in another client's file. And I realized, we never even used this artwork. They looked at it, but they didn't approve it. We went with a completely different direction. So I recycled that artwork for this new client, Valley Parking Services, changed a few things in the artwork and presented that new artwork to the client, and they were super happy with it. So that's another reason why you want to do a file save as on your project. You want to make sure that you save the work. So that way, if somebody above you, your art director, your creative director, your VP, your marketing manager, the sales manager, marketing, legal, whoever it is, can go back and look at the artwork and approve it. And then also, if you are working on your own as a freelancer like I did for many years, and you know that this design concept that you've saved from another client that they did not purchase would work better for another client, you can recycle that artwork too, because you've done a file save as. If you want more tips about things in Photoshop or Illustrator, or want some private one-on-one lessons with me, Stacy, you need to go to my website, stacyschilling.com. You need to click on my Photoshop or Illustrator classes, or click on the private lessons link. Sign up for 5, 10, or 20-hour lessons, and then you can work with me privately. Have a great day, designer. Bye.